Excellent. Over the this is our third week, we've been talking about a series called Awake Kingdom Come, as we've been thinking about the behaviors we as a church believe will help us become the church that God has called us to be. And we started this series thinking about a quote by Stephen Covey, and he says this: start with the end in mind. Start with the end in mind. And we want to be a church that is intentional. We want to be intentional about who we believe God has called us to be. And in the first week, we were thinking about how we put the kingdom first. Last week, we thought about how we need to be fueled by prayer. And today, we're thinking about love in action. And as we kick off, I want to start by telling you a story. I can't remember if I was either 18 or 19, and my friend had won to see tickets to see Coldplay in the O2. And I'd never been to a gig before, and he invited me. And how can you say no at this point? It was free tickets. And the slightly more interesting thing was that he absolutely loved Coldplay, and I'd only heard them on the radio. And so I do my prep before I go. I listen to their album a few times. And I would say that I like Coldplay, but this was my introduction, if I'm honest, to them. And the concert was great, but I can't help but thinking while I was there sitting in this box how much of a fraud I was. Everybody there knew the lyrics. They knew what to expect. They'd spent money to see them. And then there's me. I barely knew any of the words. I didn't know what to expect. And I got the tickets for free. I wasn't a follower of Coldplay, and it made me feel like a fraud. Maybe you've had those experiences too, where you felt like you just don't belong or you don't deserve something. And if you follow Jesus, I think we can feel like this too, can't we? Or maybe that's just me. You can say that you're a follower of Jesus and people look at you differently and they start to watch you and listen carefully to the things that you say and see if they'll actually align to what they believe a follower of Jesus should be. And this is just creates so much confusion, doesn't it? Because we live in a world and an age and a culture that believes that they know what a follower of Jesus should be. There's assumptions, there's rules, there's regulations, and sometimes, and most of the time, those are stringent on the rules, and actually it creates a misconception of what it means to follow Jesus. So, how can we move from being a fraud to a follower? Because I think everyone wrestles with authenticity to some level, don't we? How can we become people who don't allow other people's assumptions and expectations lead us astray? But how can we remain faithful to being a follower of Jesus? I think it starts with seeing what Jesus' expectations of what a believer and a follower of him really looks like. And maybe you're here and you're curious about what it means to follow Jesus today. And what we're going to look at is what Jesus laid down as his definition of what a disciple and what of a follower of Jesus actually looks like. And I wonder, have we been confused with being interested in Jesus rather than actually following him? As we look at some of the words of Jesus, we're going to be looking at them in the book of John. Now, the book of John was written by a guy called John. Okay. And John was one of Jesus' disciples, and he wrote down all that he saw and all that he heard Jesus say and do at the end of his life. And as John wrote these words down, he had seen his friends die for the faith that they believed in. It actually had seen him being put in harm's way and actually tried to be killed for what these words would then go on to say. He'd seen people persecuted, but he'd also seen the impact on communities when people have witnessed these lives transformed by God's love. See, when we come to this section of scripture that we're reading today, it happens just before Jesus is taken to the cross. Jesus knows what's going to happen. And I guess, if I was to put it this way, if you had one last night with your friends and your family, what would you tell them? Because I bet if you knew that you had one last night, you would tell them the things that really matter. And in the book of John, as we come to this, there's this sense, this dialogue that happens that actually takes up 20% of the whole of the book of John. And it's just in the upper room with his friends before he goes to the cross. And one of the things that Jesus wanted his disciples to know was written in John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. And he says these words, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Like, Jesus is clear. Like, we ought to love one another. In fact, he says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. Like, I believe this has two implications. And the first is this, that love is a public evidence of Jesus in the lives of those who follow him. Love is a public evidence of Jesus in the lives of those who follow him. When people are wanting to know what Jesus is like and they look to our church, do they see people who love others well? Because this is the primary way that Jesus has said people, will see him at work through those who follow him. Like, Jesus doesn't say that people will recognize his followers by their certainty, by their arguments, by their religious activity, but by their love. Which means, even if you wouldn't call yourself a Christian here today, you can recognize this kind of love that Jesus is talking about. And maybe that recognition, maybe seeing that love is the beginning of a question worth exploring. And the second thing I think it teaches us is that spiritual maturity is based on how well we love others, not on how much we know. Spiritual maturity is based on how well we love others, not on how much we know. In the Western world, we're fixated on knowledge and information, and we take this to our relationship with Jesus. And I think we can get so caught up in knowing stuff about God, about the scriptures, that we can forget about God, and we can forget that God is relational. And the scriptures should be leading to transformation. And we can end up feeling like a fraud following Jesus. Now, please understand me. I'm not saying that we shouldn't learn and that we shouldn't grow in our understanding of the scriptures. What I am saying is that love is the evidence of being a disciple. And surely our spiritual maturity is shown by how well we love others. I think Dallas Willard puts it best when he puts it like this. He says, love is not opposed to knowledge, it's the right use of it. And it's this reason why I believe it's so important that when we come to the scriptures, when we look to apply it to our lives, We need to think, we need to wrestle with how it doesn't just have an impact on our lives on a Sunday, but actually how it has an impact on our lives on a Wednesday afternoon when work is difficult, family pressures are building up, life is getting on top of us, our boss is being difficult, we've just received bad news, or we've just been offered a promotion. Like, it's in all of those situations. What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus then? And as we read the words of Jesus here, what does it mean for my life this week? And we've learned that growing in love is the life of spiritual maturity. And that the love is the evidence the world needs to see Jesus through those who follow him. And this is how we can move from feeling like a fraud to a follower. But what does that mean for us this week? Jesus says, I have loved you, so you must love one another. Jesus has been given the example of love to us as followers, and I'm not going to focus on all the ways that Jesus has shown us love, but I want to focus on 3 different ways with you this morning. Is that okay? And they are sacrificially, servant-hearted, and being present. I'm going to start by looking at sacrificially. And these words that we're going to read just before Jesus went to the cross, as he's just about to sacrifice himself so that we may benefit. And the Apostle Paul, as he's summing all of this up, he says it this way in the book of Romans, in chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Like, this means while we were far away from God, choosing our own selfish desires, our own interests, Jesus decided to die for us, so that we might come into a reality of God's love for us, and that he is for us, and that we can be in relationship with him. And what if following Jesus means we need to love others even when it might cost us? We might not even want to love someone in work, but Jesus modeled to us that while we were still sinners, like, sacrificial love doesn't mean we accept it when people don't treat us well. It doesn't mean that we automatically allow people who have grieved us back into an open relationship with us. What it means is that we have boundaries. And actually, God showed us how we can put boundaries in place, and boundaries aren't a bad thing back in the Garden of Eden. Because back in the Garden of Eden, he created us to have a relationship with him, but he'd put in boundaries. So when I'm saying that we should love others to the cost of ourselves, what I don't mean is that we should do it to the point where we hurt ourselves in the process. But when I say we should love others at the cost of ourselves, it means that it might cost us money, it might cost us time, it might cost us accolades, it might cost us energy. Like, even if you don't follow Jesus, sacrificial love still moves us, because it reflects something so deeply human, doesn't it? And Christians would say that because we were made in the image of God who gave himself away, that's why we all crave this type of love. Ultimately, what we see in the person of Jesus is that people matter. The people in our lives matter. And I don't just mean our friends and our family. I mean our colleagues, the milkman, our colleague, our neighbors. Like, if we truly believe that people matter, like, how do we show them sacrificial love? I believe it's the volunteer who goes that little bit further, even when it's not easy to do so. I believe it's the neighbor who helps to clean the street, even when no one notices. I believe it's the friend who will take you even to the hospital, even when it's inconvenient to themselves. I believe it's the family member who will choose curiosity over judgment. It's thinking tomorrow, how do I show that people around me matter? Sacrificial love was modeled by Jesus, and we need to grow in both our receiving of it and our giving it and showing it towards others. See, a fraud might try and impress, but as followers, we know the way of sacrificial love. The second was servant-hearted. And Paul, when writing to the church in Philippi, he said that we should take on the same mindset as Christ Jesus. We should be like him, and as followers of Jesus, we want to be who Jesus would be if he were me. And I'm aware that Jesus was a Middle Eastern carpenter. He was born in around the 1st century. And I'm also aware that I'm a white Caucasian man leading a church in the 21st century. Like my life looks different. And the reality of it is your life looks different to Jesus's too. We could be of a different gender, race, occupation. But to be followers of Jesus, we need to think about how Jesus would live and act if he were us. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, you might be thinking, well, does this mean that I have to change? And when following anything, I believe we change, don't we? Like, it impacts, when we follow a new band, it impacts how we spend our time, what we listen to. In fact, I remember when I would have been about 14 years old, my friend was playing a video game on his PS2 at the time. Look how old I am. And he was playing this game so much that it started to impact how he was treating his brothers. To the point of where his parents turned around to him and said, "You're not allowed to play that game anymore." And then, consequently, how he treated his brothers started to improve. Like, what we follow, what we spend time on, has an impact on how we live. And my point is this: whatever you spend time on, whatever you're following, impacts how we live, and our lives change over time because of it. And if we are to have the same mindset as Jesus, we will change. And Paul says it this way when he was talking about Jesus' mindset. He says, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. See, here we see Jesus left heaven, left eternity, left his glory so that he might come to know us and that we may come to know Jesus. And what was this broken relationship was able to be mended into this unbroken relationship with the Father. And we can show this now to others. I think a great example of this in church history is a guy called St. Francis of Assisi. For those of you who are unfamiliar with St. Francis of Assisi, he lived this incredible life of telling people about Jesus. But his life could have been very different. See, he grew up extremely wealthy, lived this extravagant, carefree life. Like, he loved parties and he dreamed of becoming a knight. And actually, he then felt called to live like Jesus. Poor, humble, and devoted to others. And he chose God's way over his own. And this didn't come without cost, because he gave up the family wealth. He started to live this humble life, and he started a Christian renewal in the 1200s. And something I believe that we can learn about St. Francis is this act of service as he resisted the desire to live for himself. He showed this life of humility over the grandeur of being a knight to be a follower of Jesus. And please understand me. I'm not saying God's way means that everyone will go into vocational ministry. But what it does mean is that we choose to act and live like him in our workplace, with our friends, with our family, and within our communities. It means that we won't use control, manipulation, or arrogance and pride to get ahead, but we will choose integrity, honesty, and service. See, following Jesus through servant-heartedness frees us from ego and from pretending. See, what if your workplace saw that in you? Like, how different could your influence be? How different could your influence be? And our third and final way we're thinking and considering God's love was how he's being present with us. Like at Christmas, we literally spent some time reflecting on this, and we reflect on the name Jesus and the name that Jesus was given in the Old Testament. And it's this name, Emmanuel. And Emmanuel literally means God with us. In the Message translation, we read in the book of John, chapter 1, Jesus coming to earth. And I believe that Eugene Peterson just writes this and puts it in a lovely way. And he says it like this: the Word, who's Jesus, became flesh and blood, and he moved into the neighborhood. Like Jesus made himself known and available, and he moved into the neighborhood. It's very American, that term, though, isn't it? But he became present with us. And in becoming present, he showed us this radical hospitality. And even though, as Paul showed us, that when we were still sinners, when we were still far from God, when we were hostile towards God, that actually it was in those moments that Jesus entered in and he shared tables with those who were often ignored, ostracized, and excluded. Like, he moved into the neighborhood so that we, each of us, could all come to the table and be in relationship with him. See, I don't believe you need to be a Christian to know the power of someone being fully present with you. Like, most of us know what it looks like when it's rushed and overlooked and when we're treated like an interruption. But Jesus steps into that and actually shows us this is what love looks like. This is what it means to be near. And he shows us what God being near really looks like. And if you're exploring faith today, maybe the question isn't, do I believe everything yet? But what if the question is, what would it look like to step into this kind of life that Jesus describes? It means that we should be able to extend the table to those around us, create environments and atmospheres that people actually want to be in and come back to. And this is actually both important for us as a church, but also for us individually. See, as a church, we want to be present in our neighborhood. We want to be present in our community. And so often the church is known what it's against. But I want us to be a church that is known for what we're for. And we're for our community. We're for our city. See, on a Sunday, we want to create a warm and welcoming atmosphere that allows people, wherever they are on their journey of faith, to come and explore and engage. And it means that all of us who call Kingdom Life Church our home, we have an expectation on us to facilitate that kind of church, that kind of culture. A culture that will go the extra mile. A culture that is serving without being noticed. Bearing the inconvenience for someone else's good. Giving grace to others even though you'd rather be right. And we want to show and see love in action. We want to be the kind of people that when people notice when they come in for the very first time. See, that'd be the church that I'd love to be a part of. And obviously, this shouldn't just be here on a Sunday, but it should be how we're going to show radical hospitality to those around us every day. And when I talk about radical hospitality, I'm not talking about fancy meals or dinner parties, you're all right. But it's about an invitation, isn't it? Asking someone to come and sit with us next Sunday. It's about creating spaces for people who can't give back. It's about helping others without expecting anything in return. It's creating margin in our own lives so that we might be present with people so they don't feel like an interruption. It's about learning the new guy's name, remembering the stories of your neighbors. It's about actually seeing people. See, because when we fake it, we focus on ourselves. And when we're followers, we're led to those around us. Imagine we were a church who caught onto this. Not just what we've heard today, but what we've thought about over the last 3 weeks. What if those behaviors became who we are? A people who place God's kingdom first, who are fueled by prayer and put love in action. What would change? I believe our homes would feel different. Our homes would become places where they would be described as non-anxious presence in the world. We would know God as our provider and everything we have that comes from Him. And because of that, we live open-handedly. Our workplaces would notice, not because we just shout louder, but because we put love in action. People would feel safe around us even if they didn't share our beliefs. And people would seek us out because our lives look different. A community would be affected as our needy world would meet and would be met with compassion. See, our church would carry a different weight as we would be known for what we're for. We would become a place that holds our community close and opens up our doors wide. We would have an invitational culture, and God would be moving amongst us, and we would be expectant that He would be. As a church, as our church, Kingdom Life Church exists to awaken people to the reality of Jesus and to bring heaven to earth here in Newcastle. And I pray that we would see that. That we would become a church that would become a people who put the kingdom first, who would be fueled by prayer and put love into action. And maybe you've heard something today about how Jesus loved you. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that. For those of you who've never made the decision to follow Jesus before, that you can make that decision to be a follower today. And as we go back into worship today, I want us to come in a place where we come back before a God who loves us, because the reality of it is that we could never do any of this on our own. That we need to be changed to become more like Jesus. And actually, how do we do that? It's by taking the focus off ourselves and putting the focus back on him. So I'm going to invite the band back up. And we're going to pray. And maybe you're here and you've never made that decision to follow Jesus. And as I say this prayer today, I'm going to ask you to pray it along with me. And afterwards, I'm going to ask you, if you've said this prayer, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand so that I might be able to give you something just to help you on that journey. But if you're also here going, I want to be a part of a church just like that. I want to see God continue to change me more into his likeness. I'm going to encourage you to say this prayer too. God, I know that I can't do this life on my own. I'm sorry for the times that I've done it wrong. I'm sorry for the times that I've ignored you and wanted to distance myself from you. I want to be a follower of you, Jesus. I pray that you, by the Holy Spirit, would help me do that. That I may be somebody who'd be able to show love to those around me.